Washington is trending for a top 5 running back.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Lars got a really fun show coming out all day, every day today, but just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you don't miss when we post a new video, and make sure to follow us on social media. We're on all forms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Locked On Huskies. A lot of fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason, and today, we're going to be talking a whole lot of recruiting because it is that time of the year. We're going to dive into this tight end class and have another discussion about if Washington will take 2 or not, because the way the skill position class is working out is really interesting. A lot of offensive talk today because we got to talk about the offensive line. It's shaping up to be a really interesting discussion there. But Lars, it looks like Washington's next commit might be 4-star running back Brian Bonner. Real quickly, before we get into that, we want to give a big shout out to UW women's soccer's goalkeeper Mia Hamat and her battle against kidney cancer and everything. If you want to go check out a little bit more and support her, the link to her GoFundMe is down in the description below. Our thoughts and prayers are with her and her family and Nicole Van Dyke, the entire women's soccer team at this point in time. And Lars, if you got anything on that, please feel free to go right on it before we get into Brian Bonner.
Yeah, this is an incredibly unfortunate situation, but also speaks to the community that's around me. So it's one thing
Absolutely.
that terrible to go through, but also the fact that she has so many people in her corner, and obviously, the donations just keep breaking in, but as they should, because anything can help. So glad to see that support, but also it's everything is kind of galvanizing around Washington, and it's a segue into Brian Bonner, where he came on his official visit, a guy we've talked about ad nauseum over the past few months, and we always kind of wondered, was it going to be Deshaun Rideau? Was it going to be Brian Bonner? Obviously, Deshaun ended up making his decision to go to USC. But even I think before he made that decision, we'd kind of, sensed like Scottie Graham was the amount of I can't count how many times I've seen photos on social media, either of Scottie Graham at school, at his home, on campus at UW with Brian Bonner. And it just almost seems like I can't tell if it's, Hanson or Brian Bonner at this point, because you might as well just be committed at this point, which speaks exactly what we're talking about here. And Scottie Graham wants to take 2. He's, I think, zeroed in on Brian Bonner a while ago. And so it's just a matter of, I think, when, not if at this point, in my opinion.
So I'm with you there. And let's talk about one of the things that really plays a major factor in that, because we talked about Javian Osborne committing to Notre Dame a few weeks ago. And then this morning, as we record this on Wednesday, Steve Wiltfong over at On3 put it in a crystal ball for Notre Dame to also land 4-star running back Jonas Walton, who I believe is from Georgia. So you're taking 2 4-star running backs in that class, and it just kind of crowds that position. So it's something I was talking about with a couple of our insiders earlier today, where they were asking, hey, how are you feeling about Bonner? It starts to feel like things are trending in the right direction, which is another reason you and I want to have this conversation. By the way, the link to our insider group, which is dropping so many fun recruiting stuff over there, that's also down in the description below. So go check that out. But one of the things with Bonner was not just, all the visits. It's not just the crystal ball. It's not just, hey, I don't think he's taken that official visit to Notre Dame at the end of June at this point in time, if everything continues to trend in the direction that it is. But you talk about Scottie Graham wanting to take 2 running backs in each class. And we've talked about this being the souped up version of that for a while, where you get a big power back in Hanson Sanoa. You get him committed really early. By the way, he's been committed for over a year now. Which is shout out to him in this world of college football for doing that. But on the other side of that, I look at what Brian brings to this class and the way this whole coaching staff has been on the recruiting trail recently, where, we spent a lot of time this week talking about getting Derek Coleman-Brusa, getting Kodi Greene, those top end prospects. Brian Bonner falls into that category of recruit. And it's not just the recruiting rankings, where he's ranked as the number 5 running back by 247 Sports, but it's the film and it's what he brings to the table. And it's why when you look at that offer list, where Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame were among those teams that were standing out to him for a good long while, and you look at Scottie Graham and Jedd Fisch and this entire coaching staff, keeping Washington in the mix the entire time and being really at the front of the pack, I can't even say in the mix, is not only a testament to the coaching staff, but a testament to what this offense can do for a player like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an example of Scottie Graham and the relationships that he builds, where Jedd Fisch, we talk about it all, ad nauseum again, where the word relationship is thrown around so much, but Scottie Graham, even when we talk to him, and I know I'm repeating myself because we said this on the podcast before, but it's true. I think that's why Scottie connects so well. And then you pair that with a brand like Washington, and why not if you're a 4-star running back on the West Coast from the state of California, you're looking around like, hey, Kodi Greene from Modern Day, he's staying on the West Coast. He's going to be blocking for me. The quarterback's from New Jersey, so be it. As long as we got a good quarterback that works with me, like that's all that matters. And it comes down to trusting Jedd Fisch, and, Scottie Graham trusts Jedd. I think I forgot when Jedd said it, but he's like, we got the OGs, and Scottie Graham is a part of that OG group where Jedd got him into coaching. He was an administrator up until, coming to Arizona. So the fact that Scottie, relatively quote unquote new into the coaching role, but it's because he knows how to build relationships. And I think that's ultimately what kind of won, if I'm assuming what Brian Bonner would say once he makes his decision, and if it happens to be Washington, it's going to be, the relationship that he has with Scottie Graham is second to none. The brand allure I can see of Notre Dame, in a way, when you were talking about it, it kind of reminded me, not like for like, but in a way of Chris Lawson, where we had kind of sensed that it was going to be Washington, but Oregon was kind of, hanging around. He kept pushing back his decision, and they ended up taking Decory Moore, I think from Louisiana,
That's right.
So that was one where it wasn't, okay, like if one goes here, the other one goes here. But I think we always thought Chris Lawson was going to be the guy that ended up in Washington. And Brian Bonner kind of falls into that similar category where 2 4-star guys, 2 talented kids from California. And it's like, okay, if you don't want to go back east or go to Georgia or Alabama, they don't offer you, stay on the West Coast. We'll still be playing them either way.
So this is one of those things that we've seen it from some of our everydayers in the comments, and has been something that you and I talked about yesterday when we talked about Landon Barnes. It's winning battles over those schools where he does have those offers, right? From Alabama, from Georgia, from, again, Penn State, Michigan, all these other big time schools in the Big Ten as well. And it's something that I look at, and, our good buddy Coker over on Twitter put it out there and talked about what Washington's resume is like over the last 10 years. And it's Washington belongs in that category of elite teams. And it's always been about having somebody at the helm who can sell that consistently to these top end recruits, because you look at what Washington was able to do with some of the best recruiting classes in school history. You go to the national championship, you're able to go to 3 straight New Year's Six Bowls. You have that resume. You have that top tier resume that very schools in the country can truly stack up with. And all the schools that we just mentioned are the ones that are actually doing that. So having somebody at the helm like Jedd Fisch who can go to Brian Bonner, and having Scottie Graham as well, obviously in this case, but who can go to Brian Bonner, who can go to Kodi Greene and Derek Coleman-Brusa and all these other guys that you're looking at in this class outside of the, of the normal recruiting footprint that you and I talk about all the time, whether it be Mason James, Chase Calicut, though that list goes on. And just saying, hey, you might not realize it because the Pac-12 didn't do a really good job covering everything that was going on around here, but this is a truly elite program in college football. And you have every single opportunity here at Washington that you would if you were to go to some of these more traditional powerhouses. Why not blaze your own trail and come do that up here? And it feels like that pitch is really starting to work.
And if I do say so myself, I don't know where you are, if you have a window outside that you can look at, but despite what people say about the weather, like this is kind of the perfect time for Washington to sign that April, May, June, July period. Again, in August, September, maybe early October starts getting a little cold, but it's like, it's really not as bad as what people think. And, we hear that from kids all the time where, man, Washington surprised me. This is beautiful. The lake is right. And it's like, it's one thing to hear it. It's another thing to see it. And now when you see other kids around you that are just as elite as you saying, oh, wait, he sees the vision. It's like, somebody's going to create an AI version of Jedd at the altar and just be like, all these recruits just flocking to him. And it's like, yeah, like we've heard the good word.
Lars, let's move on to the offensive line. right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I use Game Time because I love those last-minute deals, saving up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. And with their all-in pricing, it means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Surprise, we're back from the break, and it's just me, unfortunately, for the rest of the way. Lars had to bow out. He was having some technical issues, so he'll be back on tomorrow's show, and for the rest of the day, you just get to hear my voice talking right at you for the next 20 minutes or so, I hope you enjoy that, because we are talking about Washington's 2026 offensive line class. Now, unfortunately, Lars isn't going to be here for a really interesting discussion that we were having right before we pressed record, where we were talking about, hey, are you going to take 4 players in this offensive line class? You're going to take 5 because you've got 2 committed already, right? You've got 5-star offensive tackle Kodi Greene, and you've got 3-star interior offensive lineman Adion Yang. So as we kind of move forward, probably going to start our way outside here and work in, because there are arguments that can be made for both. And when I say we start outside and work in, we're going to start with the offensive tackles, and then we're going to get into the notes that I got about some of these guards, where a tackle, we've already seen one player take his official visit, and that's 3-star offensive lineman Aaron Thomas from Arizona, and he's really been on the rise over these last couple of weeks on the recruiting trail. Texas A&M is starting to push hard for him. Ohio State is in the process of setting up an official visit. I'm sure Florida State, where his father played, is going to be in the mix there as well. And a couple other schools, as they can begin to notice, this is a really big – I love Aaron Thomas. I think he's a very, very good prospect, where – this was his first year playing along the offensive line. Until now, he had been playing defensive line, made the switch, and has looked really, really good at the position. So it's no surprise that he's seen all this really, really fast interest ahead of his senior season. So that's a prospect I'm going to keep a close eye on. And when I talk about the debate of 4 offensive linemen versus 5, this is where Lars and I were like, well, no, you could take 5 if you do this, but maybe you could take 4 if Aaron Thomas decides he wants to follow in his dad's footsteps. Because Washington already has one bona fide tackle in the boat in Kodi Greene, like I said. But you start to look down the line, and it's if you can get more big projectable bodies that might be able to play a little bit further down the line, you'd love that. And you've got 2 of them, Aaron Thomas being one that you're interested in. The other one is 3-star offensive lineman Dominic Harris, a favorite on this show from Ed W. Harris High School in Las Vegas. And with Harris, it's kind of the opposite in terms of just play style from what you see from Aaron Thomas, where he's very clearly still learning how to play. They're both clearly still learning how to play the position in their own ways. But when you look at Harris, he's 6'8", 350. It's a very different style of just blocking and just where they are in their development in terms of just everything from footwork to pass protection to getting downhill and run blocking and how you're able to just kind of use your leverage and different things like that. And I think that this coaching staff, whether it be Michael Switzer, the guys in the front office, Jedd Fisch, if there's a possibility to take both guys, I think they do it. But the more I look at this class, the more I say there's also a possibility that you only take one of them to go along with Kodi Greene. Because when we look at the rest of this offensive line room, there are so many young players that are already committed and just kind of going through this process already in year 1, in year 2. When I think about guys like Justin Hilkema, David Boyajian, who are in their second season, and what John Mills and Jack Schaefer both look like, because I think they project out long-term as tackles as well. So there's a possibility that you take 2 and maybe somebody moves on if they don't think that they're going to end up cracking the rotation like what it looked like with Michael Watkins transferring down to San Diego State. So there's an opportunity to take as many talented bodies as you want at the position and stack them later on. But if you want to prioritize one kind of project over the other, because they're both a long way off from seeing the field at the college level, but for very different reasons, you can try to find a way to figure that out. So that's something that I would certainly monitor closely if I were somebody who liked to follow recruiting, knows how important the offensive line is moving forward. That's something I would keep a close eye on. And then I look on the interior, there are a bunch of really interesting names that Washington is involved with. The top one being somebody who's already taken his official visit in 4-star interior lineman Sam Utu from Orange Lutheran down in Southern California. And as I look at his recruitment, I say, I think Washington is in a really solid spot for him, where if they want to sell him on the Champ Tilialia path, let's call it now, since, we're kind of past the Arizona days at this point where Jonas Savanaia is doing the same thing and Jordan Morgan, where they're playing really early on in their careers. I think that Sam Utu might be in that same department just in terms of his size and his physicality at this point in time, where you can play him in 3-4 games as a true freshman if you were to commit to Washington, that is. And because of just where he is in his development, you're going to feel really comfortable with that. Just like it's very clear that's the plan for John Mills, for Champ Tilialia, and maybe even Jack Schaefer as well. We'll see how that works out as we get into fall camp. But I'm really curious to see what Washington wants to do with him, because I think they might try to take somebody who projects out as a pure center in this class. And there is one that Washington will be hosting, a borderline 4-star prospect from Texas. I do apologize if I butchered his name. Pulit Primus. Again, sorry if I butchered that name. But he's somebody that I look at, and playing down in Texas, he's got some center, got some guard experience. And it's something where when we look past the 2026 class, Landon Hatchett's going to be out the door. And you've got a couple of guys that you seem to like at center long-term, where I don't know how you feel about any of them starting at this point in time, whether it be Zach Henning. We've seen Jake Flores take some snaps there as well. Champ Tilialia did the same at early points in the spring. But I think you want somebody who has a little bit more experience at the position, which is why when Kalen DeBoer's staff was able to get Landon Hatchett, for many reasons, obviously, one of them being he had that pure center experience, it was such a big win. And you could say the same thing about Parker Brailsford during his time at Washington. So I look at what Primus brings to the table, and I think he fits that mold really well. And I like where Washington is building this offensive line. And in terms of guys that are going to play early, I don't think he fits that mold as of this point in time. He's somebody who's gotten a lot of big time interest. He's got 7 or 8 official visits set up, and good on Washington to go down into Texas and find a way to get into the mix for his services. But the more I look at not just him, but a couple of these other guys that this coaching staff seems to be invested in, they're taking so many different body types and just finding ways to work it out once they get on campus. And I think Primus is, again, just a guy who fits in that mold really, really well. Because when I look at not just his play style, but I look at just how he projects out, I think he's somebody that this coaching staff doesn't have. He's somebody who moves really well from the interior of the offensive line and can pull and be a lead blocker on a bunch of different kinds of things that this coaching staff likes to run. So I look at that and I say, okay, you can find a way to use that sort of guy, certainly outside of your normal recruiting footprint. So you love every win that you can find a way to get from Texas, from anywhere in the South, really, and then in the Midwest. And as you get further east for players like Landon Myrie at tight end, who we'll get to in a minute, and Derek Zammit and the like. So I look at that recruitment and I say, I'm not sure where Washington might stand at this point in time. Getting him on campus for that last weekend of official visits on June 20th is going to be crucial there, where you love getting that last impression on a kid before visits shut down. And a lot of them like to make their decision over the summer before they get into their senior season. So it's not a decision that's just weighing over their heads. So curious to see where they stand there. And one other guy I want to talk about, where, let's be clear, I don't love Washington's chances right now because of what the school he's committed to in USC is doing on the recruiting trail. But I have a feeling that Washington is going to try to make a push for Easton Taffa. According to 247 Sports, he's still scheduled to take an official visit on June 6th. And remember, this is a guy who was at the top of Washington's board along the interior of the offensive line for a while, was committed under Brendan Carroll, but decided to back off and ended up choosing USC after the coaching change there. So that's something I'm really curious to see how that one plays out. And to bring it back to the original theme of, do you take 4, do you take 5 offensive linemen? Easton Taffa is the kind of guy where if you feel that you have a shot there, you take 5 offensive linemen and you figure out the numbers later. And that's something that I really like about what Jedd Fisch, Senior Director of Player Personnel, Matt Doherty, and this coaching staff are doing. It's they're finding ways to work out numbers later on. That's something Lars and I like to talk about a lot on the show, is when you have an opportunity to take a talented player, you do it and you worry about the numbers another time. And we've seen Jedd Fisch already just live up to that over the course of the spring, where when the revenue shares and all those sorts of numbers were first announced, Jedd said, yeah, we're going to stay fast at 85 bands for the scholarship limit because we want to maximize the revenue sharing that our players can get from that. And he's already said, well, yeah, that's really nice, but I don't necessarily want to run off somebody at this position, or I want to make sure I retain everybody over here and just continue to add depth and just breed that competition, which is something he seems to be so keen on. So being at 86, 87, 88 men on the scholarship limit doesn't seem to be that bad. And I'm just curious to see how that might work out along the offensive line, where we saw how much Washington's group struggled in 2024. We expect them to take a step forward here in 2025. And with Kodi Greene, you have an opportunity to continue to just take steps forward in 2026 and beyond. So if you need to do that by investing extra bodies in the position, I think that's the right way to go about it. So a whole lot to keep in mind right there. But we got to flip gears here because I mentioned Landon Myrie. We got to talk about this tight end room. Right after a message from our friends over at Fire TV. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. If you could play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console, and if you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your or your kids' games wherever you plug in. For me, if I go out on the road this football season, I'm still going to want to find a way to keep up on MLB The Show, Call of Duty, so many games, and the best way to do that, if I plug in my Fire TV Stick in my hotel room, that's going to be the easiest way, and it's a great way to kill some time for me personally. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. Before we get out of here today, I want to talk about Washington's tight ends class. This is a really interesting discussion because I'm under the impression that Washington is going to take 2 tight ends. A lot of this for me comes from the fact that you're losing at least one guy after the season, Quentin Moore. I'm curious to see what ends up happening with Ryan Otten. It's been an unfortunate situation that he hasn't been able to stay on the field just yet with what tight ends coach Jordan Pappau called an unfortunate just string of bad luck. During the course of spring practice, he didn't practice for the majority of the spring. We'll see if that's able to carry over to the fall. Obviously, we wish him the best and want to see him back on the field as soon as possible. But if things don't improve, I feel like Washington might be even more tempted to take two tight ends in this class. And it's interesting because they have 3 really good options available to them. Let's start with the guy who has been on campus twice in the last 2 months on a pair of unofficial visits, and it's come all the way out from Ohio, and that's Landon Myrie, 3-star tight end from Princeton High School in Cincinnati. And this is somebody who was on campus for junior day. It looked like he just really developed a strong relationship with who we thought then was going to end up being Washington's quarterback in the 26th class in Brady Smigel. And after that visit, he gets a crystal ball to Washington from On3 Steve Wiltfong. So I really want to see how this process plays out because I really like what Landon brings to the table. I think that he is a very refined route runner and pass catcher at this point in his high school career, and is somebody where I look at what Jordan Pappau and Jedd Fisch want to do with that room. They like using 2 tight ends. They like that 12 personnel where you can have somebody to be that inline blocker and then somebody is that move, that H-back sort of tight end. And I think Landon, just at his size, where he's listed at 6'3", 235 right now, fits that mold really, really well, where he's not necessarily the most refined blocker at this point in his career, a lot like Decker DeGraff was last season. And I think that's the best way to compare and just kind of look at what kind of role he might be used in if you were to commit to Washington, is that sort of Decker DeGraff kind of mold. And I look at that and I say, I like where Washington sits with him right now. He's a guy who's had a whole lot of big time interest, but I think Washington and the way that they've been able to develop tight ends and what Jordan Pappau does with that group has really stuck out to him. So I'm curious to see how that one works out. And I say that because the other 2 guys that Washington is looking at, they kind of seem like long-term projects who have a lot of upside, especially as blockers, but I don't think they'd see the field right away. And I want to start with the guy who Jordan Paopao just went to watch him pitch the other day in Utah, and that's Kai Wesley, the 6'7", 6'8", 235 pounder from Orem High School in Utah, 3-star prospect who's gotten a lot of interest from around the West Coast. But it feels like Washington, just like with Landon, has been the team that's been sticking out for him for a while. And side note, seeing a 6'8" guy pitch like that, super fun. Love to see that as a former baseball player myself. I love to throw that in there when I can, just to talk about these guys that play baseball, like Bear Naone being another one down in Oregon. The 4-star tight end who's going to be coming in this summer wasn't able to enroll early because he wanted to go win that 4th state championship on the diamond. So again, just love to see that. But when I look at Kai Wesley, I see somebody who I remember talking about this about a week or two ago, who would develop in a very similar light to what Kaleki Latu did over his one season here. And I think that that's a path that he really seems to like, and something that Jordan Paopao excelled with. I was so impressed with what he was able to do with just one season of Kaleki Latu, how he helped bring him along as not just a blocker, but a pass catcher as well. And that's something where when you watch Kai Wesley's high school film, it's exactly what you'd expect. And I mean that in the most respectful and the best possible way, that he is so much bigger and stronger than everybody else on the field that it's easy for him to just win on inside release moves like a slant route and different things like that, because not only is he able to just, stick his hands out and he's reaching farther than any other defender, but it's because he understands how to use his leverage and use his size to his advantage. So that's something where you're not necessarily going to be able to win like that all the time at the college level. So that's something where it needs a year or two to develop. That's totally fine. And that's one of the reasons that I believe that Washington would be just remiss if they didn't take 2 tight ends, because I look at that and I say, getting those 2 guys in the boat where you have somebody who could play right away, where you talk about losing Quentin Moore and the guys behind him, Cade Eldridge, Austin Simmons, Bear Naone, you like having that, but you want to just continue to have that string of talented tight ends. And if you're in on such just different types of players, why not take both of them? And it's not the same conversation at running back where just the way that position just kind of, you can churn through them based on injury or based on different things like that. But I look at what tight end means to Jedd Fisch's offense and the way they like to use those players in the slot sometimes, the way he likes to throw them again in that H-back role in the backfield, or just move him all over the formation. And when you have one of those guys, that's great, but you want somebody else who's really going to be able to hold up as a blocker. And I think Kai Wesley would do that really well. And I think Kekua Omua, the other tight end that they're in on, who's also set to visit on that last weekend in June, the 3-star product at an IMG Academy in Florida, would also fit that mold really well. And I look at Omua and I think he is just the epitome of right now. If you wanted to plug and play him as a blocker, a lot like Quentin Moore, I think you'd be more than happy with that. But with what you have in the room, if Omua does end up at Washington, I think that he's another guy who, like Kai Wesley, you can be a little bit more patient with and say, yeah, we're comfortable having, a year or two of you just kind of sitting and developing and learning behind Bear Naone, Austin Simmons, Cade Eldridge, again, all those other guys that are in the room before we see you hit the field, because we love the physical traits that you have, but we just like where these other guys are in terms of their physical progression a little bit more at this point in time. So we're willing to take a backseat and see how your development plays out. And I look at those 3 guys and I say, Washington would probably want to take 2 of them, because as you continue to look at just this move to the Big Ten and this need for size and need for physicality, having players that can just be matchup nightmares for you really is the best way to put it at tight end, whether it be as a receiver, where if you want to split them out wide, I feel like a lot of these Big Ten defenses are going to want to throw a linebacker out there on them. And somebody like Landon Myrie has the understanding of as a wide receiver to not only run around them with his athleticism, but to understand how to just beat them in single coverage, just in routes in the passing game. So I think that's something that's really important. And then I look at the physicality that an Omua or a Kai Wesley might be able to bring to the table as a run blocker when you want to run downhill. And, to bring it back to the conversation we were having earlier about a running back class of Brian Bonner and Ansu Sanoe, having somebody who can not only go out there and catch passes for you, but be that physical extra blocker, that it's not, they're throwing an extra offensive lineman on the field, there's a 95% chance this play is going to be a run now. Having somebody who can just be that versatile weapon for you is really, really important. So if you can add 2 more of those bodies, it also goes back to what we were just talking about with the offensive line of, if you're comfortable doing different things with revenue sharing and finding different ways to make sure you're compensating your players fairly in a way that's going to make them happy and keep them out of the transfer portal, you might as well find as many ways to do that as you possibly can. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for being here. As always, thank you to the Everydayers for tuning in. And just a quick reminder, again, if you want to go check out Mia Hamad's GoFundMe page, the link to that is down in the description below, whether you're here on YouTube or on any of the audio-only platforms as well. Please make sure you go check that out. Mia was fantastic for the Huskies this season and is somebody who absolutely deserves all the love and support that she can possibly get. All of us here at Locked On Huskies, our thoughts and prayers are with you, Mia. Best of luck to you out there. And to all the Everydayers, again, thank you so much for being here. And please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure to click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.